The first snow came early that year. Not the gentle kind that touched rooftops like feathers and melted by noon, but a harsh, unyielding blizzard that rolled over the hills like a white army marching with silent determination. It buried barns, erased pathways, and swallowed the horizon whole. People in the village of Brannenhof had always known winter. They had endured seasons when the frost cracked window frames and the wind howled like wolves starving for days. But this felt different. More unforgiving. More merciless. As flakes drifted endlessly from a sky the color of ash, a boy named Elias pressed his forehead against the frosted glass of his family's stone cottage. He was 17, old enough to be sent to the front, young enough that fear still clung to his ribs like a cold fist. His breath fogged the window, and he drew a small circle in the mist with a trembling finger. Beyond the glass, the world was disappearing. Somewhere far from the safety of his home, the war raged on, an invisible monster spreading across Europe, devouring towns, reshaping maps, and turning boys into soldiers. Elias's older brother, Marcus, had already been taken by the war. The army officer who came to collect him last spring promised glory, medals, a march home in triumph. There had been no letters. No news. No proof that Marcus still lived. The silence spoke louder than any death announcement. Elias turned from the window when he heard the crackling of logs. His mother, Annika, hunched over the fire, trying to coax more warmth from the already dying embers. Her hands, once soft and nimble from embroidery work, were now rough and discolored from chopping wood, kneading hard dark bread, and washing clothes in ice-cold water. "We'll need to ration the firewood again," she murmured without looking at him. Elias nodded, though the words tightened something inside him. Ration. The word had infected every home, every conversation. Ration food. Ration candles. Ration warmth. Ration hope. His father, Otto, sat in silence at the wooden table, repairing a torn jacket, his battlefield injury from the last war leaving him with a limp and a chest that ached when he breathed cold air. He had seen what guns and grenades did to men. He had seen comrades turned into memories in the blink of an eye. Every time the distant thunder of artillery echoed across the winter sky, his gaze went hollow. War did not only claim those on the front. It claimed those left behind. A loud knock shattered the quiet. Everyone froze. Knocking rarely brought good news, only soldiers demanding supplies, or neighbors desperate for food, or officers with cold expressions and tragic letters. Otto pushed himself up with a pained grunt. "Stay here," he told Elias. But Elias had already crossed the room, reaching the door before his father could protest. With a deep breath, he pulled it open. Snow flew inside immediately, clinging to their clothes, the floor, the walls. A figure stood outside, wrapped tight in a heavy coat, fur hat, and scarf covering everything but a pair of tired eyes. It was old Frau Myers, their nearest neighbor, though her farmhouse was half a kilometer away. Elias, she gasped, stepping forward. "Please, help." Her words were sharp breaths in the freezing air. "My cow, she's trapped, collapsed from the cold. She's all I have left. If she dies..." The rest did not need to be spoken. Without that cow, she would not survive the winter. Otto quickly grabbed his coat. "Elias, get the lantern." Annika tried to stop them. "It's too dangerous. The wind." "She needs us," Otto said firmly. "We cannot let the winter kill one more soul." Elias grabbed the lantern and lit it with shaking fingers. Together with his father, they stepped into the blizzard. The wind bit at Elias's face like shards of broken glass. Snow crunched beneath their boots, each step heavier than the last. The lantern glow carved a small island of light in the endless white darkness. Frau Myers's barn was half buried when they arrived. Elias's heart pounded as he pushed open the warped door. Inside, the smell of hay, sweat, and fear filled the air. The cow lay on her side, legs useless, breath shallow. Her dark eyes rolled weakly at the sight of them. "She needs warmth," Otto said. "Help me lift her." Elias nodded, placing his hands beneath the cow's heavy torso. The muscles in his arms burned as he heaved with all his strength. The cow moaned, a low, heartbreaking sound. Otto covered her with burlap sacks and straw while Frau Myers hurried to fetch hot water. For a moment, Elias looked into the animal's eyes. They glistened with trust that humans could save her, trust that life was still worth holding on to. "Don't give up," he whispered. Cold crept through his coat, turning his bones into ice. But he didn't stop. Nearly an hour later, the cow stood shakily on her legs, nudging Elias as if to say thank you. Frau Myers wept as she hugged them both. "You are angels," she whispered. Elias smiled faintly, but when he stepped outside the barn, the smile vanished. A distant rumble echoed from the east. Gunfire. The war was getting closer. By the time they returned home, night had cemented its hold on the village. The fire in the cottage was nearly dead, the room lit only by 3 stubby candles. Anika rushed to help them remove their soaked coats. "You shouldn't have gone out there," she scolded, though her voice trembled with relief. "No one survives winter alone," Otto replied simply. Elias sat near the fire, rubbing his numb fingers. His mind drifted to Marcus, wondering if his brother felt even colder at the front, sleeping in a shallow trench filled with snow and mud. Wondering if he slept at all. Every night, Elias prayed silently, not for victory, not for glory, but for his brother to come home alive. The village bell suddenly clanged. Once. Twice. Then again and again, desperate, urgent. Otto's face drained of color. "That's the alarm." Elias leapt to his feet. The door burst open before they could react. A soldier stood there, snow-crusted on his uniform, rifle slung across his back. "Gather in the square," he ordered. "Enemy forces are advancing. We must prepare to evacuate." Anika's hands flew to her mouth in horror. Otto stepped forward. "But we have families, children." "No time," the soldier barked. "Move." Elias felt his legs move on instinct as they rushed outside, joining a stream of villagers stumbling through the blizzard toward the square. Lanterns flickered like dying stars. People clutched blankets, pots of food, whatever small belongings they could salvage. Children cried as mothers wrapped them tight under wool shawls, shielding them from both cold and fear. The village mayor, a stern man with a thick mustache, climbed onto a crate and shouted over the wind. "We have information that enemy troops are only hours away. We must be prepared to leave our homes for the western camp." The crowd erupted in panic. "Leave? In this storm? We will freeze before dawn. My husband is out there. He will not find us. We have nowhere else to go." Elias's breath hitched. The thought of abandoning everything, the cottage, Marcus's bed, the memories carved into every wooden beam, felt like betrayal. "Quiet," the mayor roared. "We will leave only if the soldiers cannot hold them off. For now, prepare. Pack what you can. The soldiers will protect us until relocation is necessary." A small relief washed over the crowd, though fear remained like a weight around their necks. Elias turned to Otto. "What do we do?" "We gather what matters," his father replied. But what mattered, when war could take everything? Back home, Anika pulled out a small wooden box from the cupboard. Inside were a handful of precious mementos, a faded photograph from their last summer before war, a lock of Marcus's hair from when he was a child, the silver cross that once belonged to Otto's mother. Little pieces of a life worth fighting for. Otto stacked the last pieces of firewood near the hearth. "We keep enough to last the night," he murmured. "Just in case." Elias packed clothes, blankets, and the scarce food left, mostly potatoes and a hard loaf of bread. He hesitated before taking Marcus's jacket from the hook. It still smelled faintly of pine and smoke. He folded it carefully, pressing it to his chest before placing it into the bag. Outside, soldiers stomped through the snow, their shouts sharp against the wind. The war had arrived at their doorstep. Later that night, long after the village had fallen silent, Elias lay awake on the floor, wrapped in a coarse blanket. The fire cast faint shadows across the ceiling. The wind battered the windows, roaring like a wild beast desperate to break in. He listened to his parents' breathing, uneven, restless. The war had stolen their peace long before it reached the village. Suddenly, the distant thunder returned. Boom. 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 Artillery. Elias ran to the window. Faint flashes lit the sky beyond the hills, like lightning trapped inside storm clouds. The ground trembled. Anika rushed to him. "Step away, Elias." But he couldn't move. For the first time, he saw the war, not as a story told in hushed voices, not as a shadow creeping closer. It was real. It was here. Otto grabbed his rifle from the corner, a relic from his soldier days. He checked the barrel with shaky hands. "We may need to defend ourselves," he said. Anika looked horrified. "You can barely stand when it is this cold." "I will stand for my family," he said through clenched teeth. Another blast rolled across the night, closer this time. Snow drifted from the roof, shaken loose by the vibration. Elias's heartbeat thudded in his ears. Then, a knock. Soft. Terrified. Not the harsh pounding of soldiers. Otto motioned for silence as he approached the door. Elias stood beside him, gripping the iron poker from the fireplace like a weapon. Otto opened the door a crack. A figure collapsed into his arms. Snow-covered. Uniform torn. Blood on the collar. A soldier. Elias froze when he saw the face, pale, bruised, barely conscious. Not just any soldier. His brother. Marcus. For a moment, everything disappeared: war, snow, fear. Only Marcus existed. "Marcus?" Elias gasped. Marcus struggled to speak, his lips cracked and trembling. "Eli, help, they're coming." His body shook with cold so violently that Anika wept as she rushed to pull him inside. Otto barred the door behind them. Marcus was alive. But he hadn't come home safe. He had come home with a warning. Outside, the blizzard swallowed the world whole. Footsteps were already erased by the wind, leaving no trace of where Marcus had come from, or what might be following. War had found them. And the snow, merciless and endless, was hiding the approach of death. Marcus drifted in and out of consciousness as the storm raged outside, his breathing shallow, his eyelids fluttering like thin sheets of paper caught in the wind. Elias knelt beside him, gripping his brother's cold hand as if afraid he would vanish again, this time not to war, but to death itself. "Marcus, stay with us," Elias whispered. "Please." Anika rushed between the table and the stove, heating water, preparing clean cloths, tearing her last good blanket into strips for bandages. The look in her eyes was both relief and terror. Relief that her eldest son had returned. Terror at what the war had made of him. Otto carefully peeled away the frozen fabric of Marcus's coat. The sight beneath it drained all warmth from the room. A deep gash snaked across his shoulder, still bleeding despite the cold. Bruises mottled his ribs in shades of purple and black. Frostbite gnawed at his fingertips. "What happened to you?" Otto asked, voice trembling though he tried to hide it. Marcus opened his mouth, but only a weak rasp emerged. "Ambush. We were retreating, enemy scouting patrol." He winced as pain shot through him. "I ran. I didn't want to die in the snow." Elias could barely hear him over the wind screaming against the walls. The war that had felt distant that morning now coiled itself around them, suffocating. Otto cleaned the wound with hot water while Marcus clenched his teeth, choking back cries. The sound of pain felt wrong inside the home where laughter once lived. Anika pressed a vial of herbs into Otto's hand, a precious remedy saved for emergencies, and he mixed a paste to pack the wound. Marcus's skin twitched. His jaw tightened. "I'm sorry," Otto murmured. "You didn't send me to war." Marcus forced a smile that broke quickly into a grimace. When it was done, Marcus collapsed into a heavy, exhausted sleep. Elias tucked a blanket around him, but chills continued to rack his body. "He needs proper shelter." A doctor, Anika said with a cracking voice. Otto shook his head. The roads are blocked. The storm is too strong. And soldiers patrol every path. Elias sat back on his heels, helplessness pressing down like the weight of burial snow. Just hours ago, all they had feared was hunger and frost. Now death wore a uniform. Marcus stirred awake sometime near midnight, his voice a rough whisper. Elias. Yes. I'm here. Elias leaned closer, swallowing the lump in his throat. Marcus stared up at the ceiling as if searching for memories trapped between the shadows. It was worse than anyone said, he murmured. The front is hell, trenches filled with snow and bodies. We dig foxholes just to lie with the dead. If you fall asleep, you freeze. A shudder rippled through him that had nothing to do with cold. They're coming, Eli. The enemy, they're moving fast. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow, they plan to take the whole region. No mercy for anyone left behind. Elias felt heat rush to his face, anger, fear, disbelief all tangled together. But why didn't you stay with your unit? With help? Marcus's breath hitched. There were no officers left. No orders. Just, run. His voice crumbled. I didn't want to die alone in the snow. I thought, if I could just see home one more time. Elias grabbed Marcus's shoulder gently. You're safe now. Marcus shook his head. No one is safe here. As dawn crept over the horizon, gray and suffocating, the storm finally weakened. Snow lay deep enough to swallow a wagon whole. Footprints were erased almost as soon as they were made. The village bell tolled again. People stumbled out of their homes, or what remained of them, gathering in the square. Soldiers patrolled the edges of the village, rifles ready, breath puffing in panicked clouds. The mayor spoke with a voice that trembled despite the megaphone in his hand. We must evacuate tonight. A convoy is on its way to lead us west. Pack only what you can carry. The roads will be dangerous, but staying here means certain death. Gasps, cries, prayers, fear spread like fire. Elias stood with Otto and Anika, Marcus leaning heavily on their father's arm. He could barely stand. How would he survive the journey? Frau Myers clutched the arm of another neighbor, her face pale. What about my animals? I can't. There is no time for livestock, a soldier barked. You leave what cannot walk. Elias's stomach twisted. The cow they saved last night, all that effort, just to abandon her to freeze or starve? War was merciless to the innocent. A group of soldiers marched past, boots crunching loudly. One caught sight of Marcus, eyes narrowing. You. Soldier. You abandoned your post, the officer demanded. Marcus stiffened. Elias instinctively stepped in front of him, fists clenched. He was wounded. Anika snapped. He barely made it home. The officer grabbed Marcus by the shirt collar, yanking him forward. Deserters face execution, he hissed. Otto stepped forward, jaw clenched. He needs a medic. Not punishment. The officer sneered. The army decides that. Elias's heartbeat thundered with fury. He imagined slamming the officer into the snow, imagined shouting until the whole world heard. A voice cut through the air like a blade. He is a hero for surviving hell. Let him breathe. The speaker was a tall lieutenant with stern eyes and a pristine coat. He approached with slow, deliberate steps, his gaze fixed on the officer gripping Marcus. Release him, the lieutenant ordered. The officer hesitated only a moment before obeying. Marcus collapsed into Otto's arms. Elias caught him before he completely fell. The lieutenant addressed the villagers now watching in silence. We will protect every one of you, he promised. But you must follow orders. The enemy is ruthless and close. Before nightfall, we leave. His words offered a spark of hope, if hope could survive war. Back at the house, Anika packed supplies with trembling hands. Otto boarded up windows, reinforcing the door with beams. Elias helped Marcus sip warm broth, his movements slow and pained. "Thank you," Marcus whispered. "For what?" Elias asked softly. "For not being a stranger when I came home." Elias blinked away, the tears burning behind his eyes. "You never left our hearts, Marcus." Outside, soldiers commanded the villagers to destroy anything useful, food stores, wagons, machinery, so the enemy could not use them. Smoke rose from barns set on fire. Families mourned not just the past but the future they would never live. Frau Myers knelt beside her cow inside the barn, stroking its head as soldiers shouted at her to leave. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry." The cow mooed softly, confused, not knowing it was being mourned. Elias looked away. Some grief was too heavy to witness. Night approached with terrible speed. The convoy had not yet arrived. The lieutenant grew tense, issuing new orders. No lanterns. No noise. Patrols on every street. If the enemy attacks, we hold them until the convoy gets here. Otto loaded his old rifle. "I pray we do not need this." Anika hugged him, her fear unspoken. Elias tucked Marcus into the sled they had prepared for the evacuation. He wrapped blankets around him and slipped Marcus's arm over his shoulders. "I won't let go," Elias said. "I know," Marcus whispered. Torches flickered along the outskirts of the village as guards kept watch in every direction. People huddled together, each breath visible, proof they were still alive. Then, without warning, a shout. A gunshot. Silence. The villagers froze. Another shot. Screams. "They're here," a soldier yelled. Enemy soldiers approaching from the east. Chaos exploded. Mothers grabbed children. Men fetched weapons they barely knew how to use. The lieutenant shouted orders drowned by the terror swelling like a tidal wave. Gunfire erupted, echoing through the snow-covered streets. Elias grabbed the sled rope. "We have to move." But Marcus pushed his arm away, eyes sharp despite the pain. "No," Marcus said. "If they overrun the village, everyone will die. I can still fight." "You can barely walk." "I don't need to walk to pull a trigger." Marcus grabbed Elias by the coat. "Don't make my suffering meaningless." Elias's voice cracked. "I can't lose you again." Marcus's gaze softened. "Then don't. Help me fight for our home." Otto approached with 2 rifles, one for himself, one for Elias. "No one runs tonight," he said. "We stand." Anika placed a hand on Elias's cheek, tears streaming. "Please, be careful." Snow swirled through the air as the battle drew nearer. The wind carried voices, shouts in a foreign tongue, approaching fast. Villagers took cover behind stone walls and overturned carts. The lieutenant rallied his soldiers, his sword gleaming under the moonlight. "Hold the line," he commanded. Elias felt his heart hammering hard enough to break ribs. He crouched beside Marcus behind a barricade of crates. Otto knelt nearby, gripping his rifle tight. The first silhouettes emerged from the storm. The enemy. Ghost-like figures in white coats, rifles raised, bayonets flashing. A single breath passed. Then the world exploded. Flashes of gunfire lit the night. Bullets tore into wood and stone. Screams blended with the roar of the wind. Elias fired his rifle, his shoulder jolting back with the force. He didn't know if he hit anything, just that he had to keep shooting or die. Otto shouted, "Reload." Marcus steadied his aim, grunting through pain, firing into the advancing shadows. Bodies fell, staining the snow dark. But more enemies kept coming. "Stay low." Elias yelled as a bullet ricocheted past his ear. Marcus's breathing grew ragged, but he refused to stop. "For the village," he growled. "For home." The lieutenant shouted from the front lines. "Push them back. Do not give." His words ended abruptly as a shot struck him. He crumpled into the snow. "Lieutenant," a soldier screamed. Their line began to break. Panic spread like wildfire. No, no! Elias shouted, firing wildly into the storm. We can't lose. Marcus grabbed Elias's coat. Listen. Elias strained his ears, through the screams, the gunfire. A distant rumble. Low. Deep. Wheels. Engines. The convoy. Reinforcements, a soldier cried. The enemy panicked, retreating into the night like ghosts fading into the storm. Soldiers chased after them only a few steps before collapsing in exhaustion. The battle was over. For now. Elias dropped his rifle, chest heaving. Otto sagged against a broken wall. Marcus leaned heavily into Elias's side, barely conscious. Villagers rose cautiously, the silence more terrifying than the chaos. Bodies lay scattered. Blood steamed against the snow. A child sobbed into her mother's dress. A man pressed his hands against a wound that refused to stop bleeding. Survival always came at a cruel price. The convoy rolled into the square, armored trucks and tired soldiers, far too late to save those who had already died. As villagers loaded their belongings and wounded into the convoy, the lieutenant's body remained where it fell, half covered in snow. A single soldier knelt beside him, head bowed. Elias helped maneuver Marcus into one of the trucks. Otto climbed in after them, clutching the rifle like a lifeline. Anika sat beside Marcus, wiping his face gently with a cloth. Elias took one last look at his home. The stone walls marked with bullet scars. The window where he once dreamed of spring. The barn where he learned to walk and feed animals. All of it being swallowed by snow and war. Marcus whispered hoarsely, "Where do we go now?" Elias tightened his grip around Marcus's hand. "Somewhere the war can't find us." A lie. A hope. A prayer. The trucks roared to life. The convoy moved. Behind them, the village disappeared into white, erased like footprints in the storm. But even as they left, one truth followed. War was not done with them. And the snow that covered their footsteps would not hide them forever. The convoy rattled down the frozen road like a line of weary beasts, metal groaning, engines coughing, wheels grinding through snow that tried to swallow them whole. Inside one of the trucks, Elias clung to the side rail as they bounced over ice and hidden debris. Marcus lay on a makeshift stretcher, his skin pale beneath flickering lantern light. Otto sat beside him, one arm protectively around his son's shoulders, the other clutching the rifle he'd used to defend their home just hours ago. Anika, though exhausted, kept gently tending to Marcus, whispering words of reassurance that barely reached his ears. The truck smelled of diesel, smoke, and fear. Families huddled together, wrapped in blankets too thin for the ruthless winter. Children whimpered. Mothers hummed broken lullabies. Men stared into the void with hollow eyes, unsure of what future waited, if any. Elias pressed his forehead to the cold wall of the truck, trying to steady his breathing. Memories of gunfire still echoed like thunder in his skull. He could still see the lieutenant falling into the snow. He could still smell the blood steaming against winter air. He closed his eyes, but the darkness felt worse. "Stay awake," Otto warned softly, noticing the tremor in his son. "Shock can make you sleep. And sleep can make you freeze." Elias nodded, gripping the cold metal tighter. "I'm fine," he lied. But nothing felt fine anymore. Hours crawled by as the convoy pressed deeper into the unknown. The only break in the monotony came when trucks became stuck and soldiers shouted orders to clear the way. Every delay twisted the anxiety in Elias's chest even tighter. Marcus stirred, teeth chattering, his voice barely audible. "How far have we gone?" "Not far enough," Otto answered. The truth was harsher. They were still in danger. As dawn crept upward, the storm eased but left behind a desolate landscape, fields buried beneath smooth blankets of white, forests transformed into skeletal armies of ice-covered branches. Villages once thriving now stood silent, roofs collapsed under the weight of winter, doors left open as if the people had vanished into thin air. The world looked abandoned. Elias wondered if civilization had ended, and they were the final ghosts left wandering the earth. Near mid-morning, the convoy stopped. Soldiers leapt down, rifles ready, scanning the hills around them. "What's happening?" a woman cried. "We can't stop here," another shouted. "We have no choice," a soldier barked. "Bridge up ahead is gone. Blown to pieces." Elias jumped out to help Otto guide the sled containing Marcus from the truck. Anika followed, clutching a satchel of what little food and medicine remained. While engineers assessed the destroyed crossing, villagers gathered together, stamping their feet, hugging themselves for warmth. Every breath stung. Elias looked up at the sky, still heavy with leaden clouds. It would snow again soon. The lieutenant who had died in the battle had said he would protect them. Now he wasn't here, and soldiers struggled to organize themselves without strong leadership. Whispers began slithering through the crowd. "We should walk north instead. The convoy is doomed. We're sitting targets. The enemy will catch us before night." Fear fed on fear. A soldier yelled, "Everyone back into the trucks. We'll take the mountain pass." Gasps rippled through the villagers. "The pass is suicide," an elderly man protested. "Even in a normal winter. It's thicker with snow than a graveyard blanket," another cried. The soldier's face hardened. "Orders stand." Elias felt a chill deeper than the cold. A treacherous mountain road, with wounded, starving, terrified civilians, and war closing in behind them. Hope felt like a luxury they couldn't afford. The narrow road clung to the side of a steep cliff. Snowdrifts rose taller than a man. One miscalculation, and a truck could tumble into the ravine below, crashing into darkness and silence forever. Marcus tried to sit up, wincing. "They're forcing us up there? Are they mad?" "You must save your strength," Anika urged. "I must stay alert," Marcus countered. "If anything happens, you'll need help." His breath trembled, but his eyes held fire. Elias admired his brother's resolve, yet hated that war demanded it. As the convoy resumed movement, a soldier walked alongside the trucks, pounding the doors. "Light discipline. No fires, no lanterns visible. We can't be spotted from the air." Even smoke could betray them. Their only warmth was each other. Hours passed, each minute heavier than the last. Suddenly, the truck lurched. Elias lost his footing, slamming into Marcus's stretcher. Otto grabbed him before he slid further. "What's going on?" Elias gasped. The truck had halted abruptly. Shouts outside. Soldiers running. Elias jumped out again, and froze. A truck near the front had skidded off the road. Two wheels dangled over the abyss, the vehicle swaying dangerously. People trapped inside screamed. "Help! Please help!" Soldiers formed a chain, grabbing ropes, trying to secure the truck. Snow crumbled under their boots, threatening to drag them down too. Elias looked around for Otto and Anika. They stood beside him, faces pale. Marcus pulled himself upright despite the pain, leaning forward, eyes wide with horror. Suddenly, a deafening crack. One of the cliffside supports gave way. "No, no!" a soldier yelled. The truck tipped. For a moment, time froze. Elias could see the terrified faces inside, eyes begging, hands reaching. Then the truck fell. Screams tore through the air. It tumbled into the ravine, rolling, smashing, disappearing into the abyss far below. Silence followed. No one breathed. Elias's knees buckled, and Otto caught him. We could have been in that truck," Elias choked. Otto's eyes glistened. War chooses its victims without reason. The convoy commander's voice broke through the horror. "We continue. Move. Now." But the fear of being next clung to every heart like frostbite. The higher they climbed, the colder it became. Air thin. Wind vicious. Babies stopped crying, not from calm, but exhaustion. You could freeze quietly, without a sound. Elias's lips split and bled. His fingers burned under torn gloves. His vision blurred. A deep exhaustion seeped into his bones, a warning that sleep might try to claim him forever. Otto pressed a small piece of bread into Elias's shaking hand. "Eat this." "But Marcus." "Already shared," Otto insisted. The bread tasted like dust, but it was enough to keep Elias's eyes open. Up ahead, engineers attempted to clear a collapsed section of road. While waiting, people curled into themselves, shielding children with their own bodies. Marcus whispered, "If I don't survive." "No," Elias cut him off immediately. "Don't speak like that." Marcus gave a weak smile. "Then promise me one thing, if we're separated, don't stop fighting to live." Elias's throat tightened. "We won't be separated," he said firmly, gripping Marcus's hand. But in this world, promises meant little. Night fell again. The convoy had only moved a few kilometers. Morale crumbled like dry bread. A soldier approached Otto. "We're splitting up. Half will take the upper path. Half will stay here until the road is cleared." "That's madness," Otto protested. "We're barely holding together as it is." "Orders," the soldier repeated coldly. Arguments erupted. Families fought to stay together. Soldiers threatened arrests. Elias looked to Otto. "We can't separate," he said strongly. Otto nodded. "We stay together. Whatever comes." The soldier shrugged. "Then stay. But know this, if the enemy reaches the village by dawn, you'll all be slaughtered before rescue arrives." He walked away, leaving terror behind as casually as footprints. Marcus muttered, "We're trapped between death above and death below." Anika hugged him tighter. "We have each other. That must be enough. Perhaps for the heart, but not for survival." Far below, faint flashes of light flickered on the horizon. Gunfire. The enemy was advancing. Elias felt ice crawl through his veins. "They're closer than we thought," he whispered. Otto looked into the darkness, jaw clenched. "We may need to move on foot." "With Marcus?" Anika asked, voice cracking. Otto hesitated, too long. Marcus answered for him. "Leave me." "No." Elias snapped. Marcus looked up at him with pleading eyes. "If I slow you down, we all die." Elias grabbed his collar. "I'm not leaving you to die in the snow." Marcus didn't argue further, but fear lingered in his gaze. The world had become a cruel scale, sacrifice for survival. Elias refused to let that scale take his brother. Not again. Soldiers scrambled as more gunfire echoed below. "They've taken the lower road," a scout shouted. "They're coming this way." Panic surged. Villagers tried to flee, slipping and falling in deep snow. The commander barked, "Form a defensive line. Hold them off long enough for the path to clear." Otto lifted his rifle. Elias did the same, though his hands shook. Anika hid behind crates with Marcus, helping load ammunition whenever Otto called out. Snow swirled violently as the first enemy shots rang out. Screams sliced through the air. Elias aimed into the shadowed forest below, firing into moving shapes. Bullets whistled past his head, chipping stone, kicking up snow. Marcus joined in, teeth gritted against agony. "For our family," he growled. "For home," Elias echoed. Night became chaos. Bodies dropped. Soldiers screamed orders that no one could hear. The air tasted of iron and smoke. Elias fired until his gun clicked empty, then fumbled to reload with frozen fingers. Suddenly, a blinding flare burst above, illuminating the battlefield. Enemy soldiers surged up the slope like wolves. One tackled Elias, driving him into the snow. Elias twisted, grabbing for his bayonet. A gunshot. The attacker collapsed beside him. Otto hauled Elias up, eyes blazing. "Don't freeze now." They pressed together at the barricade, firing, shouting, refusing to fall. But wave after wave kept coming. We can't hold much longer, a soldier screamed. Marcus struggled to rise. We have to keep them back. Elias saw his brother sway. Stay down. Please. Marcus shook his head. This is my fight too. Then. A horn sounded from beyond the ridge. Lights. More trucks. More soldiers. Reinforcements. A roar of hope rose from the defenders as the new troops stormed forward, forcing the enemy back into the forest. Gunfire faded. Silence came like a ghost. Bodies littered the snow. Survivors trembled, alive only by chance. Elias staggered over to Marcus, dropping to his knees beside him. Marcus managed a weak grin. Told you, not so easy, to kill me. Elias laughed through tears. Otto and Anika embraced them both, relief flooding their weary faces. A medic rushed over, inspecting Marcus's bandages. He must be evacuated to a field hospital immediately. Where? Elias demanded. There's a base just beyond the pass. 1 more day's travel. 1 more day. 1 more trial. But there was a destination. A goal. A reason to keep moving. For the first time since the war reached their doorstep. Tomorrow held something other than fear. It held hope. Fragile, wounded hope. But hope nonetheless. As soldiers secured the perimeter and the convoy prepared to roll again, Elias looked up at the mountains ahead, jagged, cold, merciless. Snowflakes drifted down, silent as secrets. Covering the dead. Covering their tracks. Hiding the truth that survival was becoming the only measure of humanity left. And the snow would continue to fall. As if trying to bury the footprints of everyone still fighting to live. The train tracks outside St. Aurelia had frozen solid overnight. What was once a route of movement and lifeline for supplies now lay suspended beneath an armor of ice. The silence of winter had grown heavier, pressing on the town like a warning. No one dared to speak of the rumors spreading, rumors that the war front was shifting, creeping closer with every gust of icy wind. Elias stood near the smashed window of the bakery, warming his hands against the single oil lamp Sophie had salvaged weeks prior. The boards they hammered over the windows could only do so much, the cold found every crack. He had been unable to sleep again, the nightmares too loud, too close to what he had witnessed in the trenches. He could still see the flashes, the chaos, the men disappearing into clouds of mud and gunfire. Some returned missing limbs. Others didn't return at all. And then there were the footsteps he kept seeing in his dreams, disappearing under falling snow. He was pulled from his thoughts by the faint sound of shuffling boots down the road. Sophie had noticed too. She set down her ladle, extinguished the small flame beneath the soup pot, and moved toward the window cautiously. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. Elias nodded. They exchanged a glance, silent but full of shared instinct, danger. Sophie peeked carefully through a thin split in the wood. A small group of people, wrapped in tattered coats, trudged through the village square. Not soldiers, civilians. Their faces were pale, eyes sunken as though hope had frozen inside them. A young mother clutched her child to her chest. An elderly man dragged a suitcase through the snow, its wheels jammed and cracking. Refugees. From the eastern border. Elias immediately stepped outside despite the biting wind. His breath billowed out into the air like smoke. The refugees startled upon seeing him, fear embedded deep in their movements. "It's all right," Elias said, raising his hands peacefully. "You're safe here." The mother looked up at him, her lips cracked. "Please. Is there food? Warmth?" Her voice trembled with desperation. He nodded. "Come inside. We have a fire and some broth left." They hesitated only for a second before following him into the bakery. Sophie already prepared extra bowls of soup, though her eyes revealed worry, there was barely enough left even for themselves. Still, she served every one of them without hesitation. The child who had been clinging to his mother now sat in front of the small fire, staring at the dancing flame as if he'd never seen something so precious. Another woman began to cry quietly into her gloves. "How far did you travel?" Sophie asked gently. The elderly man swallowed, his voice raspy. "Many kilometers. We come from Lorraine. Soldiers arrived with no warning, houses burned. We escaped through the night. Our tracks disappeared under the snow, but that did not stop them from following." A chill far colder than winter crept through the room. Elias exchanged a silent look with Sophie again. The Saints' army, the invading force, was closer than anyone had believed. That night, once the refugees fell asleep huddled together by the fire, Elias stepped outside once more. The streets were coated in thick snow, the lamps barely glowing through frozen glass. The silence carried a kind of dread he had learned to recognize. It was the quiet before a strike. He paced slowly toward the church tower where the town's only watchman used to stand guard. The watchman had left to find his family 2 weeks ago and never returned. From the top of the tower, Elias could see the vast whiteness stretching far beyond the village. Moonlight reflected off the snow like a silver ocean. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed, except the wind. But then he saw something in the distance. A dark line trailing across the fields. Footsteps. Hundreds of them. The snow tried to hide the evidence, swirling over the prints, but the trail was unmistakable. Elias's pulse thudded in his ears. His hands trembled as he gripped the icy edge of the tower. He knew what footsteps in fresh snow meant. "They're coming," he breathed, voice cracking into the cold. By morning, news had traveled from breath to breath among the villagers, an army was approaching. Panic fluttered beneath every action. People boarded doors, packed whatever they could carry, and argued over whether to flee entirely. Sophie refused to leave. "Run where?" she said stiffly. "Through the frozen countryside with no food? We'd die before reaching the next town." She selected another loaf of hard bread from the shelf and slammed it down harder than she meant. Cracks appeared in her composure, just like the icy streets outside. Elias placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "We will find a way to protect everyone." "We?" She turned to face him, eyes blazing with frustration and fear. "You can't fight them alone." "I'm not planning to." He held her gaze. "But hiding won't keep them from marching right over us." For a moment she said nothing. Her shoulders rose and fell with a deep, shivering breath. "Then what do we do?" "We prepare," Elias answered. The mayor called another village meeting inside the church. The pews filled with anxious bodies, the air thick with tension. Candles flickered wildly, reflecting the unease in every pair of eyes. The war had already stolen enough from them. Must their home be next? "We have only 2 choices," the mayor announced from the front. "Evacuate now or defend Saint Aurelia." A loud murmur broke out. "Defend? With what, our bare hands? They'll slaughter us. We should leave while we can." Elias stood suddenly. The room fell quiet. His reputation as a soldier, one of the few survivors from the front line, commanded attention. "If we run, we abandon our homes, our elderly, our children who cannot travel far," he said clearly. "But if we stay, we may stand a chance. They are moving through the snow. Their pace will be slow. We know these streets, they do not." Someone shouted from the front, "And what if they come in numbers?" "They will," Elias replied calmly. "But this is still our land. And we will defend it." Silence returned, this time heavier. Sophie watched him, her throat tight. She didn't want him to fight again. She didn't want him to disappear into the horrors he had survived once already. But she also knew he was right. That afternoon, the villagers worked together as if guided by a single heartbeat. Snow barriers were built across the main roads using barrels and wooden planks. Windows were further reinforced. The hunters handed out every bow and spear they owned. Even the bakery contributed. Elias and Sophie distributed bread and warm water to give everyone strength. A thin hope flickered through the village, fragile as a candle wick. but hope was better than fear. As the sun vanished behind thick gray clouds, the wind picked up. Snowflakes swirled like spirits preparing for a haunting. The first signs of dusk painted Saint Aurelia in a haunting shade of blue. Elias tightened the scarf around his neck and slung his rifle across his back. He was ready, and terrified. Sophie approached him quietly, handing over a small piece of cloth. He unfolded it. A red ribbon. For luck, she said, her voice hardly more than breath. Elias wrapped it around his wrist. Thank you. Before he could say more, a horn echoed from the outskirts of the village, long, low, and bone-deep. Elias froze. The villagers froze. Even the wind seemed to stop for a heartbeat. One of the sentries sprinted down the road, face drained of color. They're here, he gasped, pointing toward the east. Sophie grabbed Elias's arm. Promise me you'll come back. He looked into her frightened eyes, and something inside him anchored, rooted the way a tree refuses to be ripped from the earth. I will, he swore. Another horn sounded. Then came the distant clatter of advancing soldiers, boots cutting through the frozen crust of snow, forming a harsh, rhythmic drumbeat of war. The silent roads of winter had been broken. And Saint Aurelia would no longer be able to hide under its blanket of snow. Night shrouded Saint Aurelia like a veil of mourning. The world seemed to pause as soldiers approached, each step pounding into the frozen earth, vibrating through the hearts of the villagers waiting behind makeshift barricades. Torches flickered in the distance, their flames staining the snow with streaks of blood-red light. Elias's breath came slow and controlled as he crouched behind the overturned cart that blocked the village's eastern road. His rifle felt heavier than usual, like it carried not just steel and wood but the weight of every soul sheltered behind him. Hold, he whispered to the handful of villagers beside him. The hunters clutched their bows. Young men who had never seen battle trembled but did not flee. Not one of them wanted to surrender the place they called home. Snow began falling again, quiet, gentle at first, like winter had no knowledge of the brutal intent hiding beneath its beauty. Or perhaps it simply didn't care. Sophie, stationed inside the bakery with the refugees and children, could hear distant marching through the silence. Every stomp echoed against her ribs like a threat. She moved between the frightened families, offering blankets, whispering soft words of reassurance she didn't truly believe. The child from Lorraine tugged at her sleeve. Why is everyone scared? His small voice cracked. Sophie knelt beside him, brushing frost from his hair. Because the world is loud right now, she said. But people who love each other fight through the noise. The child hesitated before asking, will the snow protect us? She wished she could say yes. Instead, she forced a smile. Maybe it will. At the barricades, the first figures came into view, shadows of soldiers wrapped in heavy coats marked with the emblem of the Saint's army. They marched in tight formation, boots punching holes into the snow. Their rifles glinted beneath the torchlight. Elias raised his hand. The villagers tightened their grip. The enemy commander marched forward confidently, scanning the humble defenses with a faint smirk. Saint Aurelia, he called out mockingly, his voice cutting through the night, we advise surrender. There is no victory for you here. Elias rose slowly, positioning himself where every villager could see him stand tall. You will find no surrender here, he replied firmly. The commander tilted his head with cold amusement. Then you will find graves. Snowflakes caught in Elias's hair as he inhaled deeply. His heartbeat pulsed loudly in his ears. Fire, he whispered. Arrows sliced through the air, landing in the front line of soldiers. Chaos erupted, shouts, scrambling boots, the abrupt flare of gunfire. Torches fell into the snow, hissing into darkness. The battle had begun. Elias's first shot hit a soldier in the shoulder, sending him backward. He ducked just in time as bullets tore into the cart shielding him. The sharp scent of gunpowder invaded the winter air. One of the young villagers beside him screamed as his arm was grazed. Elias dragged him behind cover. Stay down and keep breathing. Elias urged, gripping the boy's coat to keep him from fainting. Explosions cracked across the square, grenades tossed toward their defenses. Snow burst upward in violent white clouds. Wood splintered. People cried out. Sophie flinched as the sound of distant explosions rattled the bakery walls. Dishes vibrated. The refugees huddled closer to one another, hands clasped in quiet terror. She forced herself away from the window, watching would only destroy her. Instead, she went to the supply shelves, grabbing loaves of bread and filling water jugs, preparing for whoever might stumble through that door needing help. Hope had to survive somewhere. The soldiers advanced with heavy shields, pushing over the barricades. Elias stood his ground, but every second felt like the gap between life and death grew smaller. He fired again and again, each recoil jarring his shoulder, each decision one more mark on his conscience. The hunters released more arrows, but ammunition was limited, every arrow was precious. The villagers fought fiercely, yet slowly, inevitably, the soldiers pressed closer. When the barricades finally fell, Elias rallied the defenders back toward the church, using alleys and rooftops for cover. The battle splintered into scattered skirmishes across the village. Some villagers were captured. Some wounded. Some didn't rise again. Elias's lungs burned as he sprinted through the snow, pulling a fallen comrade with him. Every breath turned to ice in his throat. He ducked behind a stone wall, chest heaving. There were too many soldiers. Too much fire. Too much war. Saint Aurelia was a small spark trying to hold back a roaring inferno. Sophie knelt by the fire when a sudden pounding rattled the bakery's front door. Her blood froze. "Help," a familiar voice choked from the other side. She ran forward and unlatched the lock. The door crashed open and two villagers staggered in, one bleeding profusely from a wound in his thigh, the other sobbing from shock. Sophie dragged them toward the warmth, her heartbeat panicked but her hands steady. "Lie down here. I'll stop the bleeding." The injured man groaned as she pressed cloth against the wound. Blood seeped quickly, staining the snow that had blown inside. "Where's Elias?" she asked urgently. The crying villager shook his head. "He was still out there, holding them back so we could get away." Sophie's vision blurred with fear. The bakery walls felt like a coffin closing in. Outside, Elias ducked into an alley just as a bullet screamed past his ear. He slipped on the icy ground, falling hard, but he forced himself up again, pushing deeper into the maze of narrow passages. He needed to reach the church tower. If he could signal the remaining villagers, they could regroup and fall back to the western exit. He burst into the main street, only to be confronted by a pair of soldiers. They raised their rifles simultaneously. Time slowed. Snowflakes hovered weightless in the air. Instinct drove Elias forward. He tackled the nearest soldier, grabbing the rifle barrel and using it as leverage to swing the man into the other. The second soldier fired, missing by a breath, before Elias drove his knee into his attacker's chest and slammed him to the ground. The scuffle was brutal, desperate. His fingers went numb around the rifle. He managed to strike the second soldier across the jaw with the butt of the weapon. The man fell limp into the snow. Elias staggered to his feet, breath sharp and ragged. Then he heard Sophie's voice in his mind. "Promise me you'll come back." He clung to that promise like a lifeline. A sudden explosion thundered from the direction of the bakery. Elias's heart nearly stopped. "No," his voice cracked painfully. Without hesitation, he ran, faster than fear, faster than reason, toward the smoke rising above the rooftops. His boots slammed into the snow, erasing his tracks almost as soon as he made them, just as the title of their fate foretold. The snow would cover their footsteps. It would hide pain. It would hide escape. It would hide death. He felt the flames of his nightmares licking at his heels. He was losing time. He was losing ground. He was losing everything. He sprinted into the square. And froze. The bakery's front windows were shattered. Flames licked the wooden frames. Soot smeared the white snow. Panic shot through his entire body as he searched frantically for Sophie among the smoke and chaos. Sophie, he shouted, voice breaking. No answer. Sophie. He collapsed to his knees, shaking, from cold, fear, grief, all of it crashing together like thunder trapped inside his chest. Behind him, the battle still raged. The village he had promised to protect teetered on the edge of ruin. And the girl who had stitched him back together in silence might now be lost in screams. The snow kept falling. Quiet. Indifferent. Cold as war itself. Flames painted the snow orange as Elias rushed into what remained of the bakery. Heat surged against his face, the smoke stung his eyes until tears spilled onto his cheeks. He ripped off his scarf and used it to cover his mouth, stumbling over broken wood and scattered bread. Sophie, he choked out, voice muffled. The fire crackled in reply, devouring shelves that once held comfort and warmth. The very heart of Saint Aurelia was burning before his eyes. His chest constricted, terror turning his breath into shards of ice. He refused to believe she was gone. He pushed deeper inside until the smoke thickened into a choking haze. His boots struck something soft. He gasped, then felt relief wash through him as he saw the refugees huddled together, coughing but alive. Sophie had led them toward the back corner, away from the flames. She turned at the sound of his footsteps. The moment their eyes met, Elias felt the world thud back into motion. "You're alive," he breathed. The fear on her face broke into desperate relief. "You came back," she whispered. He pulled her into his arms, holding her with the urgency of someone afraid she might vanish like breath in winter. But the reunion was brief. Soldiers shouted outside, the clash of metal growing nearer. "We have to move," Elias urged. He helped the injured man to his feet while Sophie gathered the children. They escaped through the back door into the snow-filled alley. The cold night air hit them sharply, painful but oxygen-rich, a harsh reminder that survival meant always moving, never stopping. Gunfire crackled from the eastern road. Screams carried with the wind. Saint Aurelia's defenses were crumbling. Elias led the group toward the far side of the village, weaving through narrow paths where shadows could hide them. Their footsteps printed the snow in a frantic pattern. Yet with every step, the falling snow tried to erase their existence. A strange irony, salvation and doom fell together from the sky. At the edge of the village stood the abandoned stables. Elias ushered everyone inside, shutting the door quietly. The children whimpered, exhaustion claiming their small bodies. Sophie knelt, holding them close. Elias peeked through a crack in the wall. Torches and rifles flashed between the houses. Soldiers swarmed through the streets like winter wolves claiming territory. Sophie slid beside him, trembling from cold and fear. "How many of us are left?" "Enough to keep fighting," Elias answered, but his voice wavered. Her hand brushed his, seeking certainty he couldn't promise. The cold seeped deeper, gnawing at bones, threatening to steal their strength with every shiver. Something needed to change. Now. Elias addressed the weary group with steady urgency. "Listen carefully. We can't stay here. We need to reach the old mines west of the village. The tunnels go deep. We can hide there and regroup." A villager whispered, "But it's miles away, over open ground." Elias nodded. "Yes. And that's why the snow must become our ally." The snowfall had turned heavy, thick curtains blurring vision, smothering sound. Soldiers would struggle to track them if they moved as one, quickly and quietly. But it also meant bitter cold. One wrong step, one moment of hesitation, and the snow would claim them too. Sophie tightened her shawl around the child she carried. "We'll go," she said firmly before anyone else could protest. "There's no other path." Her resolve sparked something alive within the others. Fear remained, but hope flickered beside it. They emerged into the storm. Wind howled like a wounded beast. Snow whipped across their faces, making it hard to see more than a couple of steps ahead. Elias walked at the front, rifle ready. Sophie followed closely, guiding the children and limping villagers. Their breaths formed clouds that vanished as quickly as they appeared. Behind them, fires raged in Saint Aurelia, orange ghosts dancing through the white darkness. Elias didn't dare look back long. Every backward glance felt like surrender. Minutes stretched into brutal hours. The refugees stumbled, exhausted. Their pace slowed dangerously. Frost clung to eyebrows and lashes. The cold crept under sleeves, seeking pulse and warmth to silence. Sophie faltered. Elias caught her by the arm. "Just a little farther," he murmured, though uncertainty gnawed his own resolve. Her lips were pale, voice shivering. "Are we going to make it?" "We have to," he replied. A sound cut through the wind, far but unmistakable. The distant rumble of boots. Soldiers were following. And gaining. "Move," Elias urged, louder now. Fear forced their legs to obey. The white landscape offered no landmarks, no comfort. Only endless snow. Then, through the snowfall, a dark shape emerged. A jagged opening in the hillside. The old mine entrance. A sanctuary carved into the bones of the earth. "Hurry!" Elias called out. One by one, the villagers disappeared into the dark tunnel, swallowed by shadows warmer than the night outside. Elias stayed behind with Sophie to ensure no one was left behind. The boots behind them grew louder. Closer. Sophie pushed the last child inside, then turned to Elias. "Come." He looked back toward the blizzard. Shapes emerged from the storm, silhouettes of soldiers, rifles raised. "No time," he muttered. He grabbed Sophie's hand and pulled her into the cavern. The entrance, once a symbol of labor, now became a threshold between life and death. He rolled a heavy mining cart across the entrance, blocking sight and muffling sound. The soldiers shouted, their voices echoing through the snow-wrapped hills. Then silence. The tunnel walls seemed to breathe around them, humid air replacing the sharp bite of winter. They were safe. For now. Inside the mine, darkness pressed close but offered protection. A few lanterns remained, likely forgotten by miners who once carved these tunnels with sweat and iron. Elias lit one shakily. The flame flickered, revealing exhausted faces, fearful, yet alive. "We'll rest here," he announced quietly, his voice ragged. "But we must keep watch. They may search the hills come morning." The villagers settled against the walls. Some prayed. Others cried silently into their coats. Sophie sat beside Elias, leaning her head against his shoulder. He wrapped his arm around her carefully, as though afraid she might break. "You kept your promise," she whispered. "And I didn't plan on breaking it," he replied, voice low and resolute. Their hands intertwined, two souls clinging to warmth in a world frozen by war. They did not speak of tomorrow. Tomorrow belonged to the snow. To the armies. To fate that could shift with the wind. But tonight, beneath the earth, they had a fragile peace. And as the lantern light dimmed, Elias closed his eyes and prayed the mine would remain their refuge. Until the footsteps outside could no longer find them. Because winter might erase tracks. But memories of home, of survival, of each other, could never be buried by snow. The night was unnaturally silent, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Snow fell gently, blanketing every broken corner of the town in a white sheet that concealed both scars and sins. For the first time in months, the thunder of artillery was far away, barely a murmur on the horizon. The soldiers had withdrawn. At least for now. Elena stood near the remnants of what used to be the town square, where children once gathered to laugh, where vendors had sold bread and flowers. Now, it was a field of silent memories. She held a lantern, its small light flickering against the wind. Behind her, the townspeople slowly emerged from cellars and basements like ghosts returning to the world of the living. Their faces were thin, hollowed by hunger and fear, but their eyes held a fragile spark. A question. A hope. Was the war finally passing them by? Matthias approached Elena, a scarf wrapped tightly around his neck. He looked older now, grief had carved new lines on his face. "The scouts say the front has moved north," he said quietly. "We have time. Maybe enough to rebuild something." Elena looked around at the survivors gathering in the square, farmers, widows, children clutching blankets too thin for the cold. The war had taken almost everything. But it failed to take them. A little boy tugged on her coat. "Is it over, Miss Elena?" he asked, voice trembling. She knelt to his level, smoothing his matted hair. "Not yet," she answered gently. "But we keep living. And that means we're winning." The child blinked, as if considering this powerful new truth, and nodded. Nearby, Tomas limped forward with a crate of supplies he had salvaged from a bombed storefront. His sister, Anna, helped him settle beside a fire the townspeople had started. Smoke curled upward into the cold sky, like a prayer asking permission to hope again. People gathered in circles, sharing bread crumbs, patches of blankets, and the warmth of their breath. The sound of soft voices and crackling fire replaced the dreadful symphony of war. For a fleeting moment, this felt like life. Later, Elena walked to the cemetery, where fresh snow covered the markers of the fallen. She feared forgetting them, their laughter, their stories, the warmth they carried. The war wanted erasure. Silence. But Elena refused to let memory be buried. She laid a single white flower, a rare survivor of winter, on the newest grave, Captain Rivers. The British soldier who died protecting strangers in a foreign land. His sacrifice had bought them time. "You're not forgotten," she whispered. Snowflakes landed on her lashes, masking the tears she fought to contain. Footsteps crunched behind her. She turned to find Matthias. His eyes softened with shared grief. "You loved this town more than anyone," he said. "Now it needs you more than ever." Elena nodded. "I'll stay. I have to." Matthias looked out at the horizon. "When spring comes, maybe we will hear birds again." It sounded like a promise. A fragile one, but a promise nonetheless. Days passed. The sun remained hidden behind thick gray skies, but life began returning in small acts, repairing broken doors, gathering wood, singing lullabies to children who had forgotten what dreams felt like. One morning, Elena noticed something different: footprints on the main road leading out of town. Not soldiers. Not invaders. People. Refugees. They stumbled through the snow, exhausted, wounded, terrified. Driven from homes farther north where the front had raged with renewed fury. Elena rushed to help them. "Come," she said, wrapping an old coat around a shivering mother. "You are safe here." The woman clutched her newborn closer, weeping into Elena's shoulder. Safe. What a powerful, dangerous word. As more arrived, Matthias gathered the townsfolk. "We have little," he addressed them, "but we will share what we can. The world forgot us once. Let us not do the same to others." There were no protests. Only nods. Those who had been saved became saviors. And in the harshness of that winter, generosity was the first sign that humanity still breathed. One night, while the firelight cast long shadows across the ground, Elena opened the old leather journal she had kept since the war began. Its pages were filled with stories she refused to lose. She dipped her pen into ink and wrote. "The snow that once erased our paths now preserves them. It keeps the memory of where we've been, and whispers that we still have somewhere to go." She looked up and saw children laughing, actually laughing, as Tomas carved wooden toys for them. Anna hummed a gentle melody. The melody spread, like warmth seeping through frozen bones. Life persisted. Despite everything. Elena smiled faintly. This town, once silent, was learning how to breathe again. Months later, the first bird song pierced the morning. People stepped outside in awe, staring at the bare branches where tiny buds now clung stubbornly to life. Spring had come. The snows melted, revealing what was hidden: old battle scars, forgotten letters, lost boots, and footprints, so many footprints. Some led away, toward uncertain futures. Some returned, belonging to loved ones who had finally come home. Some faded, belonging to those who never would. But together, they told a story. A town that endured. A community that refused to vanish. A people who rebuilt themselves from the frozen ground. Elena closed her journal and breathed in the scent of thawing earth. She whispered softly. We survived. Not victorious. Not unscarred. Simply alive. And for now, that was enough. The war had taken so much, but it had not taken hope. The snow, once a cruel blanket hiding despair, had instead preserved their footsteps long enough for the world to find a way forward. And as long as footsteps could still be seen, their story would never be erased.